the countries that don't officially exist. What if I told you there are places where millions of people live their lives, yet can't join the UN or even send international mail without a workaround? In this documentary, we're exploring the strange geopolitical paradox of unrecognized states. Imagine living in a country that for all practical purposes exists, with leaders, laws, and borders, but that most of the world refuses to acknowledge. From Taiwan's high-tech economy that produces 90% of the world's advanced semiconductors to Somaliland's functioning democracy in the Horn of Africa. These are the countries caught in diplomatic limbo, fighting for a seat at the global table. The disappearing recognition, Taiwan's diplomatic crisis. In 2023, Taiwan's diplomatic standing suffered yet another blow when Honduras severed official ties after more than 8 decades of recognition. The Central American nation pivoted to recognize the People's Republic of China instead, marking the 9th country to abandon Taiwan since 2016. Just months into 2024, Nauru, a tiny Pacific island nation, followed suit, leaving Taiwan with a mere 12 diplomatic allies worldwide. This wasn't always the case. As recently as the 1990s, Taiwan maintained formal diplomatic relations with nearly 30 countries. But the decline has accelerated dramatically over the past decade as Beijing has intensified its campaign to diplomatically isolate the island democracy. The story of Taiwan's shrinking international presence reflects a carefully orchestrated strategy by mainland China. At the heart of this diplomatic erosion lies Beijing's insistence on its one China policy, a non-negotiable stance that there is only one China, and Taiwan is an inseparable part of it. This principle forms the foundation of China's approach to international relations, requiring countries to choose between recognizing Beijing or Taipei. Maintaining official ties with both simultaneously is not an option. Like a chess master systematically removing pieces from a board, China's diplomatic offensive follows a recognizable pattern. Countries with long-standing ties to Taiwan suddenly announce recognition switches to Beijing after months of quiet negotiations involving promises of substantial Chinese investment, loans, or infrastructure projects. The cases of Honduras and Nauru illustrate this tactical playbook. Honduras secured promises of a hydroelectric dam worth hundreds of millions of dollars before switching allegiance, while Nauru's January 2024 diplomatic switch came just days after Taiwan's presidential election, a deliberately timed move demonstrating China's ability to erode Taiwan's international standing regardless of election outcomes. Similarly, when the Solomon Islands cut ties with Taiwan in 2019, it received pledges of approximately $500 million in Chinese development aid, about 8 times Taiwan's annual contribution. The statistics tell a compelling story of accelerating isolation, from 22 official diplomatic partners in 2016 to just 12 by early 2024, a 45% reduction in less than 8 years. What remains of Taiwan's diplomatic network consists primarily of small nations in the Pacific, Caribbean, and Latin America, plus the Holy See Vatican City, Taiwan's only remaining European ally. This diplomatic contraction creates cascading effects beyond mere symbolic recognition. Each loss restricts Taiwan's already limited space for international participation. Without official diplomatic ties, Taiwan's access to international organizations becomes increasingly tenuous. The island is already excluded from the United Nations and its affiliated agencies like the World Health Organization, even as observer status remains out of reach. For Taiwanese citizens, each diplomatic defection extracts a psychological toll. These losses reinforce a sense of growing isolation and vulnerability. Each announcement of a former ally switching to Beijing generates headlines that chip away at Taiwan's confidence in its international standing. The cumulative effect damages Taiwan's global position despite its economic success and democratic governance. This psychological dimension extends to Taiwan's security calculations. As formal diplomatic recognition shrinks, questions naturally arise about whether informal security guarantees, particularly from the United States, will remain reliable. This uncertainty creates a persistent background anxiety in Taiwanese society. China's strategy involves both carrots and sticks. Countries maintaining relations with Taiwan often find themselves excluded from Chinese investment opportunities or face trade restrictions. Conversely, those switching to Beijing typically receive immediate economic benefits. The Dominican Republic secured $3 billion in investments and loans after cutting ties with Taiwan in 2018. Taiwan's current diplomatic allies form an eclectic group: Belize, Guatemala, Haiti, the Holy See Marshall Islands, Palau, Paraguay, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Tuvalu, and Eswatini. The geographic dispersion reveals an important pattern. None are major powers, and most are economically vulnerable nations susceptible to China's financial diplomacy. The acceleration of diplomatic losses makes Taiwan's situation particularly precarious. While Taiwan might have weathered one defection every few years previously, the pace has quickened to multiple losses annually. This suggests Beijing is intensifying pressure as part of a broader strategy to resolve what it considers the Taiwan question within a specific time frame. The economic mismatch between China and Taiwan creates a fundamentally uneven contest. With an economy approximately 22 times larger than Taiwan's, China possesses financial resources that Taiwan simply cannot match in bidding wars for diplomatic recognition. Taiwan's foreign ministry has explicitly acknowledged it cannot compete dollar for dollar with Beijing's checkbook diplomacy. Taiwan has implemented various countermeasures with limited success. Its steadfast diplomacy approach focuses on deepening substantive partnerships rather than purely transactional relationships. Taiwan emphasizes its democratic values and humanitarian assistance. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Taiwan leveraged its effective response and medical supply donations as diplomatic tools under the banner Taiwan Can Help. The trajectory remains difficult to reverse. Each diplomatic loss creates a domino effect as remaining allies reassess their positions. When multiple countries in a region switch recognition, others can follow without facing regional isolation, evident when several Pacific Island nations switched recognition in quick succession. A stark question emerges. What happens if Taiwan eventually loses all formal diplomatic recognition? This would represent uncharted territory in modern international relations. A de facto independent, democratically governed entity with 23 million people, a high-tech economy, and its own military, yet completely lacking formal diplomatic recognition. Such a scenario would force Taiwan to rely entirely on unofficial relationships, an extraordinary situation for a functioning democracy with the world's 21st largest economy. What makes a country real? The 4 criteria of statehood. Beyond Taiwan's shrinking diplomatic circle lies an even more fundamental question. How can a place with its own currency, passport system, and democratically elected government still be denied the basic label of country? The answer lies in a 90-year-old convention that established 4 criteria for statehood. And the 4th requirement creates a paradox that keeps places like Taiwan in perpetual limbo. Let's take a step back and consider what actually makes a territory an official country. You might assume that if a region controls its borders, has a stable population, prints its own money, and governs itself independently, these practical realities would automatically confer statehood. But international law applies a different standard, one that creates the unusual situation we see with Taiwan and several other places around the world. The foundation of modern statehood rests on the Montevideo Convention of 1933. This agreement established 4 specific criteria that a territory must meet to be considered a state, like 4 puzzle pieces that must all fit perfectly together to complete the picture of nationhood. First, a permanent population. Second, a defined territory. Third, a government. And fourth, the capacity to enter into relations with other states. While these criteria seem straightforward, their application has created a complex web of international politics that determines which territories join the exclusive club of recognized nations. Many unrecognized states easily satisfy the first 3 criteria. They have stable populations, clear territorial boundaries, and functioning governments that collect taxes, maintain infrastructure, and provide services to their citizens. The challenge emerges with the fourth criterion, the capacity to enter relations with other states, because this requirement creates a circular problem. A territory needs recognition from existing countries to establish formal diplomatic relations, but it needs those relations to gain recognition as a legitimate state. This paradox traps places like Taiwan in a diplomatic bind. They function as independent states in practice, but cannot secure the recognition needed to make that independence official under international law. The result is a system where certain territories exist in a peculiar in-between space, neither fully sovereign nor clearly subordinate to another power. The concept of sovereignty itself has undergone significant evolution over centuries, adding another layer of complexity to the statehood question. Originally, sovereignty was closely tied to monarchs who claimed absolute authority through divine right. The king or queen's rule was considered supreme within their territory, and their decisions were not subject to external interference. But over time, this understanding shifted dramatically toward the principle of popular sovereignty, the idea that legitimate authority comes from the people themselves. This transformation fundamentally changed how we understand the formation and recognition of states. Modern conceptions of statehood emphasize self-determination and the consent of the governed, rather than the divine right of rulers or the decisions of existing powers. Recognition in international relations serves two distinct but interconnected functions. Legally, it formally acknowledges a state's existence under international law. Politically, recognition can signal support, exert influence, or deny legitimacy to certain regimes or territorial claims. These decisions are heavily influenced by geopolitical factors. Strategic alliances, economic interests, and ideological alignments all play crucial roles in determining which territories gain international acceptance. This distinction between actual independence and legal sovereignty creates practical challenges for unrecognized states. Take Somaliland as an example. This territory in the Horn of Africa has a permanent population of approximately 6.2 million people, a defined territory spanning 176,120 square kilometers, and a functioning government that has maintained relative stability for decades. It holds elections, issues its own currency, and provides public services. By most practical measures, Somaliland operates as an independent state. Yet without widespread international recognition, it struggles to secure trade agreements, receive international aid, or participate in global institutions. The United Nations plays a pivotal role in this system as the primary gatekeeper of official statehood in our modern world. UN membership has become the gold standard of international recognition, conferring legitimacy and access to various international organizations and resources. But the path to UN membership is fraught with political obstacles, particularly for contested territories. The UN Security Council, with its 5 permanent members, China, France, Russia, the United Kingdom, and the United States, wields extraordinary influence in this process. Any of these 5 powers can veto a state's admission to the UN, effectively blocking its path to full international recognition regardless of how many other countries support its claim to statehood. This veto power creates a situation where major powers can enforce their geopolitical preferences through the recognition process. China's veto power ensures that Taiwan cannot join the UN despite functioning as an independent state by any practical measure. Similarly, Russia can block recognition for territories seeking independence from its sphere of influence, while the United States and its allies can prevent recognition of entities they view as threats to their interests. The subjective nature of state recognition creates perhaps the most fascinating paradox in international relations. Places like Taiwan possess all the practical attributes of countries, while existing in a state of diplomatic limbo that prevents them from fully participating in the international community. This has profound practical implications. Unrecognized states must navigate complex diplomatic workarounds to participate in trade, secure visas for their citizens, and engage with international organizations. They often create alternative institutions and informal channels to compensate for their exclusion from official diplomatic circles. The gap between functional independence and formal recognition highlights the ultimately arbitrary nature of what makes a country real in the eyes of the world. While the Montevideo Convention attempted to establish objective criteria for statehood, the practical application of these standards remains deeply subjective and political. The diplomatic workarounds. How Taiwan conducts foreign relations. In the high-stakes theater of international diplomacy, Taiwan has mastered a performance unlike any other nation. When a $790 billion economy with 23 million citizens can't have embassies, innovation becomes necessity. Taiwan has engineered an entire shadow diplomatic system that allows it to function globally while carefully avoiding the diplomatic terminology that would trigger international complications. At the heart of Taiwan's approach is an extensive network of representative offices spanning the globe. Shadow embassies that perform every diplomatic function imaginable while operating under deliberately ambiguous names. The Taipei Economic and Cultural Office, TECO, serves as Taiwan's primary diplomatic outpost in countries that don't officially recognize it. While in the United States, the slightly more elaborate Taipei Economic and Cultural Representative Office, TECRO, fulfills this role. These naming conventions represent a sophisticated diplomatic compromise, allowing Taiwan to acknowledge political realities while maintaining functional international relations. This linguistic sleight of hand creates a parallel system where other nations can maintain the fiction of non-recognition while conducting essential business with Taiwan. Consider a Taiwanese entrepreneur seeking market expansion in the U.S. Despite the absence of formal embassies, she can still receive trade assistance, legal support, and visa services through TECRO, experiencing virtually the same support as businesses from formally recognized nations. The United States demonstrates this balancing act through the American Institute in Taiwan AIT, a non-profit corporation that functions as a de facto embassy led by a director and staffed primarily by State Department employees who maintain contracts with the department while performing standard diplomatic functions. This arrangement allows the U.S. to adhere to its One China policy while maintaining robust relations with Taiwan. These representative offices face unique operational challenges. Taiwanese diplomats working in these facilities don't automatically receive diplomatic immunity or official status granted to representatives from recognized states. Like actors performing without a safety net, they navigate a complex landscape where their official status exists in a perpetual gray area. Despite these obstacles, Taiwan's unofficial diplomats manage consular affairs, negotiate economic partnerships, and build cultural bridges without the legal protections their counterparts from recognized nations enjoy. Taiwan's diplomatic creativity extends beyond bilateral relations to international organizations. Excluded from the United Nations and its affiliated agencies, Taiwan has developed alternative pathways to participation in global governance. In many international forums, Taiwan participates under the name Chinese Taipei, most visibly during the Olympic Games, where Taiwanese athletes compete under this designation rather than their national name. Taiwan maintains full participation in the World Trade Organization, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum, APEC, and the Asian Development Bank. These memberships provide Taiwan crucial platforms for engaging with global decision-makers despite its diplomatic isolation. APEC has emerged as a vital diplomatic channel, with its annual economic leaders meeting offering Taiwan a rare opportunity for its representatives to interact with world leaders in a multilateral setting. While China carefully monitors these interactions, the economic focus of APEC provides cover for diplomatic engagement that would be impossible in explicitly political forums. Taiwan's approach to international engagement relies heavily on leveraging its economic and cultural advantages. With limited formal diplomatic tools, Taiwan strategically invests in building influence through trade, investment, educational exchanges, and cultural programming. Taiwan has established 39 language centers in India, creating educational connections that transcend formal diplomatic relations. This economic diplomacy has yielded measurable results. Between 2016 and 2022, trade between Taiwan and 18 targeted countries nearly doubled, demonstrating how commercial relationships can flourish even without traditional diplomatic ties. For Taiwanese businesses, these economic partnerships offer practical benefits that make the lack of formal recognition almost invisible in day-to-day operations. Taiwan's diplomatic workarounds evolved through decades of pragmatic adaptation following its expulsion from the United Nations in 1971 and the United States' formal recognition of the People's Republic of China in 1979. The result is a diplomatic system that functions effectively despite existing in a perpetual state of official non-existence, like a ghost ship visible in its impacts, but officially nowhere to be found. Taiwan has constructed an alternative diplomatic architecture that allows it to maintain its international presence rather than accepting isolation. Other partially recognized states study Taiwan's approach as a potential model for their own international engagement. While Taiwan's economic weight provides advantages that smaller, unrecognized states lack, its innovative approaches offer valuable lessons for entities navigating similar constraints. The effectiveness of Taiwan's unofficial diplomatic network reveals something profound about international relations. While formal recognition matters, functional relationships often transcend diplomatic formalities. Taiwan has demonstrated that with sufficient persistence and creativity, a nation can maintain substantial international engagement without widespread diplomatic recognition. This reality highlights the gap between international relations theory and practice. While traditional diplomatic theory emphasizes formal recognition as the foundation of international engagement, Taiwan's experience suggests a more complex reality where unofficial relations can sustain meaningful international cooperation. Yet, Taiwan's diplomatic innovations come with significant costs and limitations. Without formal diplomatic status, Taiwan must constantly navigate a complex international landscape where its very existence remains contested. Each diplomatic function requires specially designed workarounds, creating inefficiencies and vulnerabilities that recognized states don't face. While Taiwan's approach has proven remarkably effective, it represents a second-best solution to the fundamental challenge of diplomatic non-recognition. The Silicon Shield, Taiwan's semiconductor strategy. Despite Taiwan's diplomatic invisibility, the island nation holds the digital keys to the modern world. When the COVID pandemic triggered a global chip shortage, presidents and prime ministers suddenly confronted an uncomfortable paradox. The nation they don't officially recognize is absolutely essential to their economic survival. Taiwan's semiconductor industry represents a strategic fortress. While most nations can only dream of dominating a critical global industry, Taiwan has achieved something extraordinary, producing over 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. These microscopic marvels, etched with features smaller than a human hair, serve as the lifeblood of global technology, flowing through every smartphone, computer, modern vehicle, and advanced weapon system. At the center of this technological empire stands Taiwan's Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, TSMC. This single company has emerged as perhaps the most strategically important manufacturer on the planet. TSMC produces chips for Apple, Nvidia, AMD, and countless other tech giants that power the modern economy. What makes TSMC truly irreplaceable is its near monopoly on the most advanced semiconductor manufacturing processes. Only one other company in the world has similar capabilities, making Taiwan the indispensable link in global supply chains. This extraordinary concentration of such critical technology in a single location creates what analysts call the Silicon Shield, a theory suggesting that Taiwan's semiconductor dominance provides protection beyond what any military alliance could offer. The concept is elegantly simple. Any disruption to Taiwan's chip production would trigger such catastrophic consequences for the global economy that potential aggressors must think twice before threatening the island. The shield's effectiveness was inadvertently demonstrated during the COVID-19 pandemic. As remote work surged and supply chains faltered, a global chip shortage emerged that paralyzed industries from automotive manufacturing to consumer electronics. In Michigan, auto workers found themselves suddenly furloughed as assembly lines stood idle. A software engineer in Berlin waited months for computer components. parents across America searched fruitlessly for PlayStation 5 consoles to gift their children. The world realized how dependent it had become on Taiwan's semiconductor industry. The shortage was a wake-up call about a critical vulnerability in the global supply chain. This vulnerability has transformed Taiwan's political position. Countries that refused to officially recognize Taiwan's existence found themselves urgently seeking Taiwan's cooperation to secure chip supplies. Taiwan's technological prowess had effectively created a form of leverage that transcends traditional diplomatic recognition. Unlike diplomatic agreements written on paper, Taiwan's silicon advantage is etched in the circuitry of every device we depend on. What makes this shield particularly powerful is that Taiwan developed it deliberately. While semiconductor manufacturing began as an economic development strategy, Taiwan recognized its geopolitical potential. By nurturing TSMC and other chip manufacturers through targeted investment, research funding, and educational programs, Taiwan positioned itself at a critical choke point in the global economy. The strategy leverages Taiwan's strengths, a highly educated workforce, strong intellectual property protections, and established technical expertise, to create an industry that provides both economic prosperity and strategic security. However, the Silicon Shield theory has important limitations. It assumes potential aggressors are primarily motivated by economic considerations, and that the economic damage from disrupting Taiwan's semiconductor production would outweigh any strategic gains. This calculation becomes significantly more complex in situations where nationalist sentiment or perceived strategic imperatives might override economic rationality. The theory represents a form of mutual assured economic destruction, but like its nuclear counterpart, it relies on rational actors making primarily economic calculations. The United States has recognized both Taiwan's semiconductor importance and the strategic vulnerability created by having so much production concentrated in one location. The CHIPS and Science Act provides substantial incentives for TSMC to build chip production plants in Arizona. This arrangement strengthens the bilateral economic relationship while addressing supply chain vulnerabilities. In August 2022, the United States passed a $280 billion bill to encourage domestic chip manufacturing, with explicit subsidies directed toward TSMC's American operations. This significant investment demonstrates how Taiwan's semiconductor industry has become integrated into core American security interests. The U.S.-Taiwan Initiative for 21st Century Trade further reinforces these economic ties, creating a framework for economic collaboration that exists outside traditional diplomatic channels. Taiwan's silicon leverage extends beyond the United States. Every major economy depends on Taiwan's semiconductors, creating a web of relationships that functions as a form of distributed diplomatic protection. Countries may not recognize Taiwan officially, but their economies recognize Taiwan's chips every time they boot up a computer or use a smartphone. This technological leverage provides Taiwan with seats at tables that would otherwise be closed to an unrecognized state. It ensures Taiwan's concerns receive attention from world leaders and creates constant channels of communication with major powers. While these relationships lack formal diplomatic standing, they create substantive partnerships that serve many of the same functions as traditional diplomatic ties. Yet Taiwan's semiconductor advantage faces growing challenges. China, the United States, and the European Union are all investing heavily in domestic semiconductor manufacturing to reduce their dependence on Taiwan's chips. As other regions develop their semiconductor capabilities, Taiwan's unique advantage may gradually erode. Taiwan is racing to maintain its technological lead through continued innovation and investment in next-generation chip technologies. For now, though, Taiwan's silicon strength creates an unusual situation in international relations. A country that officially doesn't exist according to most nations remains absolutely essential to their economic functioning. This paradox highlights the limitations of traditional diplomatic recognition in an interconnected world where technological and economic passport problems, the practical challenges of diplomatic limbo. Beyond the boardrooms where semiconductor deals are struck, an entirely different challenge unfolds at airport customs counters worldwide. What happens when the document you hold, your very national identity, is considered invalid by the country you're trying to enter? For millions of Taiwanese citizens, this isn't a theoretical question, but a practical problem requiring creative solutions. Consider Lin Wei, a Taiwanese tech executive who was detained for 6 hours at a European airport because the border agent didn't recognize her passport. Or Zhang Min, a student who missed his first week of classes at an international university because his visa application required extra processing through a third country. These experiences highlight a stark contrast. The same nations eagerly purchasing Taiwan's advanced technology often hesitate to acknowledge the identity documents of its citizens. These complications create cascading effects. Students struggle with visa applications without formal diplomatic channels. Business professionals face delays when attending global conferences. Medical emergencies abroad become bureaucratic nightmares. A Taiwanese journalist once described having to explain her nationality to skeptical immigration officers, while the computer they used to process her contained chips manufactured in her homeland. Through persistent negotiation, Taiwan has engineered diplomatic workarounds. They've secured visa waiver agreements with numerous countries that don't formally recognize their sovereignty. These arrangements allow citizens to enter these nations without advance visas, significantly easing travel burdens. One Taiwanese traveler reported the psychological relief of being waived through immigration in a European country that had previously required extensive documentation and questioning. These visa waiver programs represent remarkable achievements, existing without the foundation of official relations. They demonstrate how practical need sometimes transcends political posturing. Countries find pragmatic solutions to facilitate travel and commerce despite geopolitical complications. For the average Taiwanese traveler, these agreements mean fewer bureaucratic headaches. The challenges faced by Taiwanese citizens find echoes in other unrecognized states, though often with fewer solutions. Somaliland functions as a de facto independent state with its own government, currency, and passport system since declaring independence from Somalia in 1991. Yet Somaliland passports face severe limitations globally. Its citizens encounter far more restrictive travel conditions than their Taiwanese counterparts. With minimal diplomatic presence and virtually no visa waiver arrangements, international travel becomes exceptionally difficult. Northern Cyprus presents another variation in navigating passport dilemmas. Since declaring independence in 1983 following Turkey's military intervention, Northern Cyprus has been recognized only by Turkey. This singular recognition creates a unique solution. Many residents hold Turkish passports, allowing them to travel internationally with documents from a recognized state. This workaround demonstrates the practical compromises citizens make to preserve mobility in a world structured around recognized nation-states. Having one's passport questioned or rejected takes an emotional toll. For citizens of unrecognized states, these experiences evoke feelings of marginalization and exclusion. Repeatedly explaining your nationality to skeptical officials while watching others sail through passport control reinforces a sense of diplomatic limbo. This extends beyond government offices into personal experiences. One Taiwanese businessman described the subtle shame he felt when colleagues from other Asian countries proceeded quickly through immigration, while he was pulled aside for additional screening. Practical challenges extend beyond passport control. Mail delivery follows circuitous routes through third countries. Banking creates significant obstacles. International wire transfers, credit card processing, and access to global financial networks all become complicated. A Taiwanese entrepreneur recounted losing a major business opportunity because she couldn't complete an international transaction deadline while traveling abroad. For businesses in unrecognized states, complications multiply. Shipping products internationally requires navigating complex customs procedures without standard trade agreements. Insurance comes with premium costs. Even maintaining an international business address becomes challenging when your location isn't in standard country drop-down menus. One tech startup founder from Taiwan described spending hours on the phone explaining to a payment processor why his Taiwan, province of China, listing was problematic. The international community's growing reliance on digital verification adds another layer of complexity. As border control increasingly integrates biometric data and electronic passport verification, analog workarounds become less effective. This technological evolution creates new urgency for diplomatic solutions addressing practical realities in the digital age. Despite these challenges, citizens demonstrate remarkable resilience. Taiwanese travelers have become skilled navigators of international regulations, armed with knowledge of which entry points process their documents with minimal friction. They maintain extensive support networks, sharing information about changing requirements and potential complications. For Taiwan specifically, these obstacles represent the tangible cost of China's diplomatic pressure campaign. Each border complication, each extra form, each secondary screening manifests Taiwan's precarious international status. Yet Taiwan's continued economic success and growing network of unofficial relationships demonstrate that functioning as a nation extends beyond formal diplomatic recognition. The economic cost of non-recognition, trade under constraints. The economic reality of being an unrecognized state extends far deeper than passport complications. When your country technically doesn't exist on paper, the machinery of global commerce itself becomes a labyrinth of obstacles and hidden costs. Researchers studying partially recognized states have uncovered a startling truth. The economic penalty of diplomatic isolation can be quantified, and it's substantial, equivalent to a 14% tariff on everything these territories try to trade internationally. This invisible tax manifests in countless ways, creating friction in transactions that recognized states take for granted. For businesses in Kosovo, transferring money internationally becomes an exercise in frustration. Companies must route transactions through intermediary banks, adding layers of administrative costs and delays. Online payment systems become roadblocks in this recognition-starved landscape. Taiwan, with the world's 22nd largest economy, feels these constraints acutely despite its economic heft and critical position in global supply chains. Taiwan remains excluded from key trade frameworks that shape the modern economic order. This translates to tangible competitive disadvantages in international markets, where efficiency and speed determine success. China's diplomatic pressure extends beyond urging countries to sever ties with Taiwan. Beijing actively prevents other nations from signing free trade agreements with Taiwan, isolating it from preferential treatment in key markets. Despite Taiwan's economic significance, only a handful of countries have established formal trade agreements. New Zealand and Singapore stand as the only developed economies willing to formalize such arrangements, putting Taiwan at a disadvantage compared to competitors. This exclusion encompasses major multilateral trading blocs that define global commerce. Taiwan remains outside the Comprehensive and Progressive Agreement for Trans-Pacific Partnership (CPTPP) and has no seat at the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership (RCEP), which includes many of its key trading partners. Even the Biden administration's Indo-Pacific Economic Framework doesn't include Taiwan, showing how recognition politics continues to hamper Taiwan's full economic integration. For Taiwanese businesses, these exclusions create concrete barriers. When competitors enjoy preferential tariff treatment, streamlined customs procedures, and greater regulatory certainty, Taiwanese companies face additional hurdles to remain competitive. The local semiconductor manufacturer, TSMC, despite being a global leader, must navigate complex trade restrictions that their South Korean competitors don't face when expanding into new markets. The cumulative effect is a persistent drag on Taiwan's economic potential. To survive in this constrained environment, Taiwan has developed elaborate economic workarounds. Its participation in the World Trade Organization under the name Chinese Taipei represents a significant adaptation. This compromise designation creates space for Taiwan to operate within the global trading system's rules-based framework, while being neither fully independent nor part of China. Taiwan also relies heavily on bilateral trade offices to negotiate unofficial economic agreements. These entities function like traditional trade ministries, but operate under the radar of formal diplomatic recognition. Through this network, Taiwan maintains vibrant economic relationships with major economies worldwide. A small tech company in Taipei must work through these unofficial channels to secure contracts with European firms, adding weeks to negotiations that competitors complete in days. The friction extends throughout the financial infrastructure underlying global commerce. Banking transactions with unrecognized territories face additional scrutiny, often requiring special arrangements that increase costs and processing times. Shipping companies navigate complex legal frameworks when serving ports in territories of uncertain status. Insurance providers develop specialized policies to cover risks in regions that officially don't exist on many nations' maps. Each complication adds layers of cost and uncertainty that recognized states don't face. Kosovo provides an instructive comparison to Taiwan. Though recognized by approximately 100 countries, far more than Taiwan's dozen allies, Kosovo still experiences significant economic penalties. The costs associated with non-recognition create a substantial burden for local businesses. A family-owned furniture manufacturer in Pristina, for example, pays nearly 15% more in logistics costs than similar companies in neighboring recognized states when exporting to Western Europe. For businesses in unrecognized territories, basic operations become logistical challenges. International money transfers require complex workarounds using intermediary banks, increasing costs and limiting financial services. A tech startup in Taipei might wait weeks for payment processing that competitors receive in days, affecting cash flow and growth potential. Taiwan's heavy reliance on international trade makes these obstacles particularly consequential. Its dominant position in semiconductor manufacturing provides leverage, but even this technological advantage cannot fully overcome diplomatic isolation. The psychological impact on businesses creates additional challenges, as uncertainty influences investment decisions and economic confidence. What makes these economic penalties particularly unjust is their disconnection from economic fundamentals. Taiwan's exclusion from trade agreements stems not from concerns about its economic policies or regulatory standards, but purely from its contested political status. The costs are imposed through political decisions that discriminate against territories based on recognition rather than economic merit. For Taiwan and other unrecognized states, the path forward involves continuously refining economic workarounds while leveraging specific advantages to overcome recognition barriers. Taiwan's semiconductor dominance exemplifies this strategy, creating such overwhelming value in a critical sector that even countries unwilling to extend diplomatic recognition cannot afford to disengage economically. The economic price of non-recognition remains steep, but through innovation and adaptability, these territories find ways to participate in the global economy despite their diplomatic limbo. The American paradox, unofficial relations with Taiwan. Taiwan's semiconductor strategy has made it economically indispensable. But what about militarily? The United States maintains what might be the most fascinating diplomatic contradiction in modern geopolitics, serving as Taiwan's primary security guarantor while officially not recognizing its existence as a sovereign state. This contradiction began in 1979 when the United States formally recognized the People's Republic of China and severed official diplomatic ties with Taiwan. But rather than abandoning Taiwan completely, Congress quickly passed the Taiwan Relations Act Tier A, creating a legal framework that would allow America to maintain substantial unofficial relations with the island. This remarkable piece of legislation effectively created a parallel diplomatic universe where Taiwan could continue receiving American support without the United States technically violating its new One China policy. The TRA's careful language reveals the delicate balance America sought to maintain. The United States will provide Taiwan with defense articles and services for Taiwan's sufficient self-defense capability, while maintaining capacity to resist any force that would jeopardize the security or social or economic system of the people on Taiwan. This phrasing, of the people on Taiwan, rather than simply of Taiwan, represents deliberate linguistic choices designed to avoid implying sovereignty while still providing meaningful protection. This framework enables America to walk a diplomatic tightrope by selling billions in advanced weaponry to Taiwan while maintaining adherence to the principle that there is only one China. The system's effectiveness stems from its inherent ambiguity, what international relations experts call strategic ambiguity. Like a sword with two edges, this policy simultaneously deters Chinese aggression through uncertainty about American intervention while preventing Taiwan from taking provocative actions under the assumption of guaranteed U.S. protection. President Ronald Reagan further defined America's approach through the 6 assurances conveyed to Taiwan in 1982. These principles remain relevant today as they establish clear boundaries that successive administrations have honored. The U.S. would not set an end date for arms sales to Taiwan, would not consult with China regarding arms sales to Taiwan, would not mediate between Taiwan and China, would not alter its position on Taiwan's sovereignty, would not pressure Taiwan to negotiate with China, and would not formally recognize Chinese sovereignty over Taiwan. These assurances, complementing the TIRE, form the foundation of America's substantial yet unofficial relationship with Taiwan. The relationship materializes most visibly in the American Institute in Taiwan AIT. While Taiwan maintains representative offices abroad, the AIT represents the mirror image, America's unofficial embassy in Taiwan. Though technically a non-profit organization incorporated in Washington, D.C., the AIT is staffed primarily by State Department officials temporarily assigned to this private entity. In 2019, the United States unveiled a $250 million complex to house the AIT in Taipei, physically embodying America's investment in this paradoxical relationship. U.S. arms sales to Taiwan have continued uninterrupted for over 7 decades, with Taiwan consistently ranking among America's top arms buyers. These transactions occurred despite Beijing's repeated demands that Washington cease all arms sales to Taipei. During the Trump administration alone, the United States sold more than $18 billion in weaponry to Taiwan, including F-16 fighter jets, anti-ship missiles, and field artillery systems. In recent years, President Biden has suggested several times that the United States would defend Taiwan if China attacked, only to have White House officials subsequently clarify that U.S. policy remains unchanged. These seemingly contradictory messages reflect the inherent tension in America's Taiwan policy, suggesting security commitments without formally making them. The relationship has evolved while maintaining its essential character across administrations. The Trump administration deepened ties significantly, beginning with then-President-elect Trump's unprecedented phone call with Taiwan's President Tsai Ing-wen in 2016, the highest-level contact between the two sides since 1979. This set the tone for an administration that approved substantial arms packages and loosened restrictions on official exchanges. The Biden administration has largely continued this trajectory. Biden invited Taiwan's representatives in Washington to attend his presidential inauguration, a first for any U.S. president. His administration has affirmed decisions allowing U.S. officials to meet more freely with Taiwanese counterparts. Military training with Taiwan's forces continues, as do regular naval vessel passages through the Taiwan Strait, demonstrating American military presence without explicitly framing these actions as defense of Taiwanese sovereignty. Congressional engagement has also intensified. Then House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's 2022 visit to Taiwan, making her the highest-ranking U.S. official to visit in 25 years, prompted extensive Chinese military drills around the island. Such high-profile visits exemplify America's approach of providing substantial support while technically adhering to the One China policy. America's strategic calculation balances multiple factors. While maintaining productive relations with Beijing remains crucial for global stability and economic interests, Taiwan's democratic governance, strategic location in the first island chain containing Chinese naval expansion, and semiconductor dominance create compelling reasons for continued U.S. support. Taiwan's advanced microchip production capacity creates an imperative for the United States to prevent any disruption to this industry, which powers everything from American smartphones to military equipment. The U.S.-Taiwan relationship ultimately represents a case study in pragmatic international relations. While the global system typically operates through formal diplomatic recognition, the Taiwan Relations Act created a parallel framework that delivers nearly all the benefits of normal relations without technically violating America's commitments to Beijing. Taiwan receives security guarantees, economic partnerships, and substantial support without the United States having to formally recognize it as a sovereign state. The ticking clock, China's Taiwan timeline. This delicate diplomatic balancing act has preserved Taiwan's autonomy for decades. But what happens when one side decides time is up? As Chinese warships circle ever closer and military analysts point to a critical window between 2027 and 2035, the abstract concept of strategic ambiguity faces its ultimate test against concrete preparations for forcible reunification. Along Taiwan's coastline, fishermen now routinely spot PLA naval vessels where once there were only local boats. The tension is palpable in border communities where military drills have become the soundtrack of daily life. This is the lived reality of a diplomatic standoff turning increasingly physical. Unlike the diplomatic chess game that continuously unfolds across embassies and international forums, China's military posture toward Taiwan operates on a different timeline, one defined by capability milestones rather than political patience. When President Xi Jinping declares that Taiwan must be and will be reunified with mainland China, his words carry the weight of a national objective with specific military dimensions behind it. The rhetoric from Beijing has grown notably more assertive in recent years. Xi's statements frame Taiwan's reunification as inevitable. This hardening position represents a fundamental shift in tone, reflecting China's increasing confidence in its growing power and influence. For the Chinese Communist Party, Taiwan represents the final piece of unfinished business in achieving what they consider complete national rejuvenation after a century of humiliation at foreign hands. Taiwan's situation grows concerning as political resolve matches rapidly expanding military capabilities. The People's Liberation Army has undergone extensive modernization specifically focused on developing the ability to seize Taiwan by force. These are practical preparations for potentially crossing the 100-mile Taiwan Strait with an invasion force capable of overwhelming Taiwan's defenses. Chinese military exercises around Taiwan have evolved into regular, complex operations that simulate actual combat scenarios. PLA aircraft now routinely cross the median line of the Taiwan Strait, the unofficial boundary that both sides largely respected for decades. February 2025's Joint Combat Readiness Drill near Taiwan involved an unprecedented combination of fighter jets, unmanned aerial vehicles, and warships, with 22 PLA aircraft deliberately crossing this once respected line. These exercises gather intelligence on Taiwan's defensive responses, familiarize Chinese forces with the operational environment, establish new norms of Chinese military presence in previously contested areas, and gradually wear down Taiwan's psychological resilience. This approach, sometimes called gray zone tactics, applies pressure below the threshold that might trigger international intervention while steadily eroding Taiwan's security position. The frequency of these incursions creates a new normal that makes it increasingly difficult to distinguish between routine exercises and actual preparation for conflict. This ambiguity complicates Taiwan's defensive planning and creates uncertainty about when and how to respond to Chinese movements. Taiwanese defense forces constantly scrambling jets to intercept Chinese aircraft consumes resources and creates pilot fatigue, potentially leaving them less prepared when a genuine threat materializes. Military analysts have identified 2027 to 2035 as a period of heightened risk. The year 2027 marks the People's Liberation Army's centennial, a date Xi Jinping has explicitly set for achieving military modernization goals capable of supporting Taiwan operations. By 2035, China aims to complete its military transformation into a world-class fighting force, creating the capability to overwhelm Taiwan's defenses while deterring American intervention. The year 2049, marking the centennial of the People's Republic of China, serves as the deadline by which he expects to achieve national rejuvenation, explicitly including Taiwan's return to mainland control. These dates align with concrete capability development plans. China's military budget has increased by approximately 7% annually for years, with funding directed toward naval and amphibious capabilities essential for a Taiwan operation. Meanwhile, China's anti-access/area denial systems have been designed specifically to keep American forces at bay during a potential conflict, making U.S. intervention increasingly costly and risky. Taiwan has embraced an asymmetric defense strategy focused on making itself an impossibly difficult target rather than attempting to match China's conventional military power. This porcupine strategy emphasizes mobile missile systems, drone technology, and distributed defensive capabilities designed to inflict maximum casualties on an invading force. Taiwan's defense budget has increased substantially, reaching record levels as the threat grows more immediate. Beyond military preparations, Taiwan has initiated whole-of-society resilience programs to strengthen civilian preparedness for potential conflict scenarios, including enhanced reserve force training, civil defense drills, and stockpiling essential supplies. The fundamental challenge remains that China's growing capabilities are steadily shifting the military balance. Each year sees China's relative advantage increase, creating a potentially closing window for Taiwan to effectively resist. This reality raises questions about how long the status quo can be maintained before China might conclude that military action presents an acceptable level of risk. For the United States and other democratic powers, this situation creates strategic dilemmas about how to support Taiwan without inadvertently accelerating a crisis. American policy has focused on helping Taiwan develop more resilient defensive capabilities while maintaining ambiguity about exactly how the U.S. would respond to a Chinese attack. Whether China is preparing for imminent military action against Taiwan remains debated among experts. Some argue that China's preferred approach remains gradualism, slowly increasing pressure until Taiwan's will to resist collapses without requiring a risky military confrontation. Others point to military preparations, leadership statements, and strategic timelines to suggest that force remains very much on the table. What seems increasingly clear is that China's patience has limits. The window during which Taiwan has maintained its de facto independence, while gradually losing formal diplomatic recognition, may be narrowing as China's power grows, and its leadership's ambitions for can Taiwan reverse its diplomatic decline? As China applies mounting pressure, Taiwan is quietly revolutionizing how unrecognized states function on the world stage. In a world where only 13 countries officially recognize Taiwan, the island nation has transformed its semiconductor chips into more valuable diplomatic currency than official embassy buildings. Taiwan faces a fundamental strategic dilemma that has no easy resolution. Pursuing formal independence risks military conflict with China, while accepting diplomatic ambiguity means managing a steady erosion of international recognition. This painful reality, where Taiwan's voice is systematically diminished in global forums, has forced its leadership to fundamentally reconsider what diplomatic success actually means in their unique situation. President Lai Ching-te and Foreign Minister Lin Qialong have articulated a significant shift in Taiwan's approach to international relations. Rather than focusing primarily on maintaining formal diplomatic allies, many being small nations with limited global influence, Taiwan now prioritizes developing substantive relationships with countries that matter most to its security and economic prosperity. This strategy represents a clear-eyed assessment of diplomatic reality. A formal alliance with a microstate provides Taiwan with a vote in the UN General Assembly and symbolic recognition, but offers little practical benefit when confronting existential challenges. Instead, Taiwan's approach builds genuine support among true allies through public campaigns and concrete partnerships. The core of this strategy involves emphasizing economic and security relationships over traditional diplomatic recognition. Taiwan recognizes that in our interconnected world, the substance of relationships often matters more than formal status. A country may not recognize Taiwan officially, but if it depends on Taiwanese semiconductors, cooperates on security matters, and shares democratic values, the practical relationship becomes more meaningful than an exchange of ambassadors. Taiwan's democratic identity has become an increasingly central element in its international positioning. By emphasizing its democratic governance, human rights record, and commitment to rule of law, Taiwan positions itself as a member of the global community of democracies, contrasting sharply with China's authoritarian system. This appeal to shared values helps Taiwan build genuine support among democratic nations, making diplomatic isolation less debilitating in practical terms. The island's dominant position in semiconductor manufacturing has evolved from an economic advantage into a powerful diplomatic tool. When the world needs advanced chips for everything from smartphones to military systems, Taiwan's technological capabilities provide significant geopolitical leverage. This silicon diplomacy gives Taiwan a seat at important tables regardless of formal status. During critical chip shortages, countries that might otherwise keep Taiwan at arm's length found compelling reasons to strengthen their relationships with the island. Similarly, Taiwan's successful handling of the COVID-19 pandemic demonstrated its capabilities as a responsible global actor. While excluded from the World Health Organization, Taiwan's exemplary pandemic response and generous donations of medical supplies generated international goodwill. This public health diplomacy showcased Taiwan's ability to contribute to global challenges despite constraints. Beyond semiconductors, Taiwan pursues broader economic diplomacy to reduce dependence on China and foster closer ties with like-minded partners. The new southbound policy represents a significant effort to diversify trade relationships and increase investment in Southeast Asia and the Indo-Pacific region. These economic ties create stakeholders in Taiwan's continued autonomy, complicating China's efforts to isolate the island. Security cooperation has become another avenue for Taiwan to strengthen international relationships. Taiwan actively develops security partnerships with countries like Japan, Australia, and European nations, focusing on supply chain resilience, maritime security, and technology sharing. These partnerships reflect strategic alignment with democracies in the Indo-Pacific region and serve as a deterrent against potential aggression. The United States, while maintaining its One China policy, has demonstrated increasing willingness to deepen substantive ties with Taiwan. High-level visits, expanded military cooperation, and new economic initiatives signal that the substance of the U.S.-Taiwan relationship continues to strengthen even as formal diplomatic status remains unchanged. What makes this strategy particularly notable is how it reaches outside traditional diplomatic frameworks. Taiwan prioritizes relationships that deliver specific, concrete benefits for its security and prosperity. This pragmatic approach recognizes that influence today depends less on embassy counts and more on economic importance, technological capabilities, and alignment with key global powers. Japan has emerged as a particularly important partner despite the absence of formal diplomatic relations. The two democracies share concerns about China's rising power and have steadily expanded their security dialogue, economic cooperation, and people-to-people exchanges. Similarly, Taiwan has strengthened ties with Australia and European nations through targeted initiatives that build mutual benefits. Expert analysis suggests that Taiwan's innovative diplomatic approaches may help stabilize its international position over time. By making itself indispensable through economic and technological contributions while highlighting democratic values, Taiwan builds a network of substantive partnerships that provide many benefits of formal recognition without requiring countries to officially recognize Taiwan over China. For Taiwan, this represents a fundamental redefinition of diplomatic success. rather than measuring achievements by official recognition counts, a metric where China's economic leverage gives it an insurmountable advantage. Taiwan focuses on relationship quality and substance. A partnership delivering concrete security benefits or economic advantages becomes worth more than formal recognition existing only on paper. This approach acknowledges that Taiwan's unique situation requires unique solutions. Unlike most unrecognized states, Taiwan combines substantial economic power, technological leadership, and democratic governance with its disputed status. By leveraging these strengths, Taiwan forges a path that secures its practical autonomy even as formal recognition remains elusive. Somaliland, Northern Cyprus, Kosovo. Different paths in diplomatic limbo. While Taiwan leverages its economic might to overcome diplomatic isolation, other unrecognized states must find their own path forward with far fewer resources at their disposal. The diplomatic playbook varies dramatically based on each territory's unique circumstances and historical context, creating a fascinating spectrum of survival strategies that goes beyond the binary question of recognition. Unrecognized states like Somaliland, Northern Cyprus, and Kosovo represent three distinct approaches to diplomatic existence. Each has developed unique strategies based on their available resources. Somaliland relies on democratic credentials and stability. Northern Cyprus depends almost entirely on Turkey support. And Kosovo pursues broad international recognition while building economic ties where possible. Somaliland stands as a remarkable example of governance without recognition. This self-declared independent region in the Horn of Africa operates with a functioning democratic system despite receiving zero formal recognition from any UN member state. Since declaring independence from Somalia in 1991, Somaliland has established governmental institutions, police force, and currency, the Somaliland shilling, all without international acknowledgement. In the streets of Hargeisa, Somaliland's capital, citizens carry on with daily life despite their diplomatic invisibility. Their passports, unrecognized at most international borders, trap many within their unacknowledged homeland. A local businessman might produce export-quality goods, but struggles to ship them abroad without recognized customs documentation. Despite these challenges, Somaliland has achieved relative stability in a notoriously unstable region. The government has developed creative diplomatic workarounds, establishing unofficial representative offices in various nations to facilitate minimal international engagement. Somaliland focuses heavily on demonstrating its democratic credentials and stability to potential supporters, particularly among African Union nations. In 2023, when Kenya recognized Kosovo, Somaliland viewed this as a positive signal for its own recognition pursuits, illustrating how interconnected the fates of unrecognized states can be. Northern Cyprus presents a contrasting model defined by its dependence on Turkey. The Turkish Republic of Northern Cyprus, TRNC, declared in 1983 following Turkey's military intervention, exists in a state of complete diplomatic reliance on its sole recognizing state. For Turkish Cypriots, isolation manifests in daily frustrations. A university graduate might find her TRNC degree questioned abroad, while a farmer watches produce rot because direct exports to nearby markets are impossible. To travel internationally, most rely on Turkish passports rather than TRNC documents, which are rejected at nearly all global borders. Where Taiwan can leverage economic relationships despite lack of formal recognition, Northern Cyprus conducts virtually all its international affairs through Turkey. This dependency shapes every aspect of its diplomatic approach, from travel arrangements to economic policy. Turkey has long advocated for a two-state solution for Cyprus, arguing that the TRNC's sovereignty should be formalized. However, even Turkey's influence has limitations. Recent developments within the Organization of Turkic States illustrate these constraints, as Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, and Kyrgyzstan, all members alongside Turkey, have recognized only the Greek Republic of Cyprus, creating diplomatic friction within this regional body. Kosovo represents a third model, partial recognition that enables broader international engagement. Since declaring independence from Serbia in 2008, Kosovo has achieved recognition from approximately 110 UN member states, creating a hybrid diplomatic environment where it participates in some international forums while being excluded from others. For Kosovars, partial recognition creates a patchwork of opportunity and frustration. A student might attend international conferences in recognizing countries, but find visa applications rejected elsewhere. Business owners navigate complex legal arrangements to export goods to non-recognizing nations. Kosovo's strategy focuses on aggressively pursuing recognition from as many countries as possible, particularly targeting the threshold needed for UN membership. This approach has yielded practical benefits, with Kosovo's citizens facing fewer travel restrictions than those from Somaliland or Northern Cyprus. The economic costs remain significant, however. Research indicates that the cost of trading with Kosovo is equivalent to approximately a 14% tariff. Until recently, Kosovo lacked a postal system and faced complications with international money transfers due to the absence of SWIFT codes. These three cases demonstrate how unrecognized entities adapt to their circumstances. Their varied origins: Somaliland emerging from state collapse, Northern Cyprus resulting from intercommunal conflict and military intervention, and Kosovo following ethnic conflict and NATO intervention, have shaped their diplomatic options and challenges. For Taiwan, these case studies offer important insights. Taiwan's situation resembles Kosovo's in terms of partial recognition, but with economic and technological advantages that provide diplomatic leverage beyond what these other entities possess. Taiwan might learn from Somaliland's emphasis on democratic governance as a legitimacy source, or from Kosovo's aggressive pursuit of international recognition. The Northern Cyprus model of dependence on a single patron state represents a cautionary tale, highlighting the vulnerabilities of over-reliance on any single supporter. What unites these cases is their development of creative workarounds that allow them to function in a global system not designed for their ambiguous status. From unofficial offices to alternative passport arrangements to strategic participation in international organizations, demonstrating remarkable diplomatic creativity in navigating their liminal status. As we've explored throughout this journey, the international system's binary view of statehood fails to capture the nuanced reality on the ground. What truly defines a nation isn't found in diplomatic registries, but in its ability to thrive despite challenges. Taiwan exemplifies this paradox perfectly. Its future lies in cultivating robust economic and security alliances that transcend formal recognition. As more global South nations align with China, Taiwan's strategic diplomacy with genuine allies becomes vital. Like a bamboo tree bending in storms, yet never breaking, Taiwan's resilience shines in providing security, prosperity, and identity for its citizens. Its true measure of success